Quibi burning $2 billion in 6 months. Imagine holding a mountain of gold worth $1.75 billion and deciding in a moment of euphoria to set it on fire just to see how the flame looks in portrait mode on your smartphone screen. This is not a surreal cinematic scene. It is the actual summary of the shortest and most expensive failure story in the history of digital entertainment, the story of Quibi. In the corporate world, we often prefer to blame luck, unforeseen circumstances, or the mysterious evils of the market. But the raw, glaring truth revealed by a rational analysis of decisions is that luck neither builds companies nor destroys them. Success and failure are the direct byproduct of a series of deliberate or erroneous choices made within a specific context. When you isolate your decisions from the data of reality, ignore scientific logic rooted in observation, critique, and inference, and design a model that doubles user pain rather than reducing it, the inevitable outcome is a monumental collapse. The story of Quibi is not merely a mobile application that failed to gather subscribers. It is a dense, philosophical, and material case study in how to make every single wrong decision possible at the worst possible time, at the highest possible cost. Chapter 1. The Rise of Digital Greatness and Delusion. To understand the scale of this catastrophe, you must first examine the board pieces and the figures involved. In August of 2018, a company called New TV was born, which later rebranded in October 2018 to Quibi, an abbreviation for Quick Bites. The core idea was simple, even alluring on paper. Offer high-quality cinematic content featuring Hollywood A-listers, broken down into short episodes under 10 minutes long, designed exclusively for smartphone viewing on the go, during commute times or coffee lines. Behind this venture stood two titans from the entertainment and technology sectors. First was Jeffrey Katzenberg, former executive chairman of Disney and co-founder of DreamWorks, a man whose weight in Hollywood is measured in decades. Second was Meg Whitman, former CEO of eBay and HP, a name worth gold in Silicon Valley. This hybrid of Hollywood and Silicon Valley gave the project an aura of absolute majesty before a single line of code was ever written. Riding this myth, Katzenberg and Whitman raised a staggering $1.75 billion in funding from major Hollywood studios, banks, and investment funds, including Disney, Warner Media, Sony, Sony Pictures, and Alibaba Group. The company marshaled these resources to attract prominent names such as Steven Spielberg, Guillermo del Toro, Kevin Hart, and Jennifer Lopez. On April 6, 2020, the platform officially launched to the public. Yet just 6 months and 3 weeks later, on December 1, 2020, the platform announced its complete shutdown, liquidating its assets and selling its content library to Roku for a paltry sum under $100 million. How does $1.75 billion evaporate in 180 days? The answer lies in how management gathered environmental data. Chapter 2. Contextual Blindness and the Wall of Reality. For any enterprise to make a sound decision, its thinking must undergo sequential scientific steps, accurately describing reality, critiquing and analyzing it, and then inferring the optimal action. Where was Quibi in this process? The platform launched its app in April 2020, the exact historical moment when the world was experiencing peak lockdowns and quarantines due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The actual context of the consumer at that time was sitting at home in front of broad television screens, possessing long stretches of free time. Yet Quibi management failed to gather contextual data, insisting instead on enforcing their predefined assumptions. The app was built exclusively for mobile phones, artificially restricted from TV casting or desktop playback. When streets cleared and coffee lines vanished, the core value proposition of quick commute content plummeted to zero. Rather than pivoting and acknowledging the new data, Jeffrey Katzenberg gave monthly statements blaming the pandemic as the sole cause of the platform's struggle. This represents a methodological collapse. Scientific analysis teaches us that an entity capable of survival adapts its actions based on environmental variables. If the context shifts, you must alter your collected data and immediately adjust your actions to minimize loss. Quibi doubled down on a technology called turnstile, a complex engineering feat costing millions to solve a problem that users never had, while big screens at home were screaming for content. Management failed to collect real-world data, replacing scientific reasoning with blind passion and gut feeling. Chapter 3: Logical Fallacies and User Experience Imprisonment. Evaluating these decisions through the lens of logic and practical ethics shows that the core goal of any sustainable product is to minimize pain and maximize satisfaction for the user, with absolute priority given to reducing friction and discomfort. What did Quibi do? It engineered a user experience riddled with software-induced suffering. First, Quibi enforced a strict technical block on taking screenshots or recording short clips within the app under the guise of protecting intellectual property. In the modern digital age, viral culture is built through memes and clip sharing on social networks. By banning users from sharing, Quibi severed its organic distribution channel and created unnecessary friction for users wanting to share a funny moment with friends. Second, and above all, Quibi leadership succumbed to the appeal to authority logical fallacy. Investors and management assumed that the presence of names as prominent as Katzenberg, Whitman, and Steven Spielberg guaranteed the validity of the business model. The opinions of these traditional executives were treated as indisputable scientific truths, ignoring that 90s Hollywood expertise does not automatically translate into success in an era of algorithms and mobile apps. Third, confirmation bias was on full display, as management refused to see real competition. When asked about competing with TikTok and YouTube, Katzenberg replied that Quibi did not compete with those platforms because Quibi content was premium and professional, while the others relied on user-generated content. They refused to acknowledge that user screen time is a single battleground. A consumer trades a minute on TikTok for a minute on any other app, regardless of production budget. Fourth, the sunk cost fallacy deepened the crisis. The company continued pouring hundreds of millions into producing short series with inflated budgets reaching up to $100,000 per minute, simply because contracts were signed and huge funds were committed, rather than halting the bleed and pivoting towards a more flexible strategy responsive to user desire. Chapter 4: The Inevitable Collapse and Institutional Survival. On the ethical scale of business entities, the criterion for organizational survival depends on generating mutual value that satisfies continuity while enhancing human well-being. When Quibi slapped a $4.99 monthly subscription fee on an ad-supported tier or $7.99 for ad-free viewing, it erected a paywall around short, unfamiliar content in a market overflowing with free, endless options on YouTube, TikTok, and Reddit. Quibi violated the fundamental rule of action generation, modifying input data to execute actions that guarantee entity survival and minimize customer pain. Instead of lowering payment friction, they stacked advertisements inside paid subscriptions. Instead of easing access, they locked content to specific mobile devices and rejected standard TV casting and content sharing features. By May 2020, mere months after launch, app downloads tanked to rock bottom. Reports revealed that fewer than 8% of users who tried the free trial opted to convert into paying subscribers. The data was crystal clear. The product solved no pain point, satisfied no need, and conflicted with modern human behavioral patterns. In a rare, albeit late, moment of clarity, the board recognized by late 2020 that continuing down this path would burn the remaining $350 million of capital without any hope of recovery. They chose liquidation to return remaining capital to investors. Quibi failed its survival test, not because the concept was ahead of its time, as some attempted to claim, but because the concept was entirely detached from logic, scientific thinking, and empirical measurement of reality. Conclusion: the final lesson from the billion-dollar mirage. The story of Quibi remains one of the most compelling cautionary tales in the history of the digital economy. It serves as a constant reminder that vast fortunes, glittering names, and complex technologies can never compensate for the absence of logical methodology. When you base decisions on subjective assumptions rather than contextual data, and when you fall into logical fallacies such as appealing to authority and confirmation bias, you head straight towards an inevitable collapse. Companies do not survive because they hold billions of dollars. They survive because they possess the capacity to accurately describe reality, courageously critique their decisions, and infer path adjustments that alleviate user pain while delivering genuine value. Quibi was a monument built on Hollywood illusions that shattered against the rock of digital reality. What did you gain from the video?